Thank you, everyone, for your patience with us this morning. So good morning, and welcome to the Care Management Training Initiative. Today is the Supervisor Learning Collaborative call number 4, and the topic is time management and workload distribution. My name is Ruth Cologne-Wagner, and I'm the Director of Training and Development with NYC, the New York Association of Psychiatric Rehabilitation Services. In this next slide, we have the remaining activities for the Care Management Training Initiative. So following today, just to give you all the dates, as you know, I am what to do. So following today is the Supervisor Implementation Planning Call, and that is scheduled for December 23rd. And then following that is webinar number 5, and webinar number 5 is Care Management Toolbox and Resources, and that is for care managers, your staff, and supervisors as well. That's scheduled for January 10th. Following that is a Supervisor Learning Collaborative call on January 31st, the Supervisor Implementation Planning call on Valentine's Day, and then after that we've got the final face-to-face sessions, and it also serves as the final activity. And you see there Region 4 is March 7, Region 5 is March 8, and Region 6 is March 10th. So we are looking forward to you completing all of that with us. So thank you so much for being with us. In the next slide, regarding outreach, and also as part of this training for everyone enrolled, we're really asking for everyone to complete all the activities. So if you've missed any thus far, or if your staff have missed any thus far, we're asking that you please have them go onto their Learning Management System account and take the webinars that they may have missed. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, great. So if we have your attendance incorrect, and we have at times had it incorrect, so please just contact me directly. And you could do that by phone, or probably email is easier, and that's ruthcw@nyaprs.org, or uthcw@nyaprs.org. As usual, if you are attending in a group, it's really very, very important that you add everyone's name to the webinar. So if you did that in the beginning, great. There is going to be another window at the end so that you can ensure, mark everyone complete, so that we can ensure that we have your attendance correct. Next slide, please. The webinar is being recorded and posted on the Learning Management System. And so for all those who aren't able to watch it with us this morning, they can watch it once we post it. And today, as usual, is very interactive, and we will ask a lot of questions, so please use the chat box to answer. And if you have any questions, use the on-screen question box, and we will answer them all and get that out to you by email. So today, we are very happy to have Bob Peter return to us, and he's going to co-facilitate today's Supervisory Learning Collaborative call. Bob, his presentation was 2 weeks ago on November 15th, and it was very well received. It was wonderful, Bob. So thank you so much for such a wonderful and informative presentation.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you. In addition to Bob, we have Paul Margulies leading today's webinar. Paul is the Associate Director for the Center for Practice Innovation. So, Paul, with that, I will pass the presentation on to you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Ruth, and good morning, everybody. We're going to spend roughly the next 50-something minutes really talking about supervision and focusing upon some of the materials that Bob had presented a couple of weeks ago, and really drilling them down to how to make this happen in the course of supervision. So here's the agenda. We're going to spend some time defining the problem. Then we're going to review solutions to the problem, and then talk about how to focus your supervision to help your care managers with time and workload management. So let's define the problem. And we're going to do a polling question, which will float up on your screen momentarily. And the question is going to say this, time management and workload distribution for care managers has been identified as a problem. The pre-webinar survey questions identified some of the key issues. for your staff, how much of a problem is this on average? And you've got 5 choices there. So we'll give you a couple of minutes to please vote your choice, and let's get a sense of the extent and the depth of the problem. People are beginning to vote, I see. We're not going to announce the early results. We'll let you know everything in another minute or so. See, a number of folks have not yet voted, so please do. Another minute, and then we will let you know the results. Okay, so here's what you're telling us. For virtually everybody that voted, it's at least something of a problem. So we have one person identified it as not an issue at all, and that is wonderful, and I think we can probably learn from you around that, in all seriousness. 3 people identified it as something of a problem, another 4 people identified it as a large problem, and 1 person identified it as an enormous problem. So I think it's fair to say that, you know, for the most part, we're talking about it being at least something of a problem and mostly a large problem. And I see the person who had voted not at all an issue perhaps recast their vote for another option. So in any event, it's a problem, and that's what we're going to spend the next period of time focusing on. So if we could remove the poll, please. We're going to move on. And so, you know, as you know, a survey was done quite some time ago, and a bunch of, we had a lot of responses. And so let me very quickly review what folks told us. What are the biggest challenges to managing workload and time? Balancing clients, paperwork, and other tasks. Setting priorities. Phone calls. Emergencies and unexpected work deadlines. People feeling overwhelmed and have difficulty concentrating. The constant interruptions. Not getting documentation on time from others. Redundant and duplicate paperwork. Caseload size, meetings, and training of new staff. And then folks were asked, if you could eliminate one thing, what would it be? And so here's the list. Assigned seminars, meetings, paperwork requirements, interruptions, time on emergencies, travel time, documenting the same information 2 to 4 times, so there's a redundancy, emails, and the amount of cases given, the caseload. So, you know, we've got a wide range generally from the response, but now we want to kind of personalize this. So in your chat box, and the chat box, as you know, is that box at the very bottom of your screen. We're going to give you a few minutes, please, and can you please type up what are the key factors that contribute to this problem for your care managers in your own situation? We'll give you a few minutes to type up. So, you know, the survey gave us a general sense of what's going on. Now we're asking specifically in your situation, what are the key factors that contribute to this problem? We really want to personalize this. See some folks are beginning to type up. We're going to give you a few minutes. And, you know, as usual, you know, with our online meetings, the more people share, the more we can learn from one another. So we really appreciate your taking the time to type up. Folks are continuing to type up. Thank you much. I see we're getting a wide range of factors, which it's good for us to identify. So thank you, folks, and continue to type up. We'll give you another minute or two, another couple of minutes, and we'll review what you're saying. Multiple attendees are typing. That's what we like to see. Thank you. Okay, thanks, folks. And Bob, as I'm looking at this, I see a number of different factors as well as some themes that are emerging. So I'm going to take a minute and just read through these. Kimberly tells us inefficient IT systems to prioritize or organize workflows. So it sounds like if there was an IT system in place that could help people do that, it would make things a whole lot more smooth and efficient. Pamela tells us new regulations that come out that then necessitate changing the way things are already done. And in a fluid system like the one we have right now, this is happening, apparently. Charlene tells us constant emergencies and crises, and Denise adds constant interruptions. Maybe some of those aren't emergencies, but still they're interruptions. Denise also adds, staff training is the source of constant interruptions. Candida says, sometimes clients have emergencies and crises that may divert the staff from maintaining effective time management. Yeah. So that's when crises emerge, all sorts of other things get pushed to the side. And Giddy tells us so many things that are unexpected that interrupt the workflow that you are trying to create. Inpatient admissions, clients that are not fully engaged and thus create a struggle in trying to contact them. Client crises or crises. Thank you, folks. This is very helpful. We're going to come back to this. Really what we're doing today is with you identifying what the key factors and key examples are of this difficulty for your staff. And then later on, we're going to do some brainstorming around ways in which you may want to approach this, as a supervisor, these issues. And then when we get back together again on December the 13th, we're going to spend much more time focusing on, so how's it going in supervising this and getting concrete, feedback from you on what you're trying and how that's working. So, I'm going to move ahead. And we have another chat box question. And now we're drilling down even more deeply. Please provide specific examples, tasks, situations, etc., so that we can better understand the day-to-day experiences of care managers related to time and workload management. So, even more detail. We have some factors, we have some themes. Whatever else you can do to shed light on what is this like on a day-to-day basis, I think would be helpful for all of us. And once again, we're going to give you a few minutes to type up. The more detail, I think the more helpful for all of us. See, multiple attendees are typing. Thanks, folks. Really appreciate that. More detailed, the more helpful. This is great. Please keep typing up, and in a few minutes we'll begin to read your responses and share with one another. Okay. I know folks are still typing up, and please continue to do so, but we'll begin to read some of the responses. So once again, specific examples that really illustrate what your staff are up against. Pamela tells us emergencies that arise, especially hospitalizations that need to be followed up in a timely manner. So that's one issue, and I'm seeing that show up, from a number of responses here. At some point, it'll be really helpful to hear from supervisors who found ways or procedures to deal with that. We're going to really get into that in our next webinar on December the 13th. Another thing Pamela tells us is clients that show up unexpectedly. Kimberly adds large volume of outgoing and incoming phone calls, coverage issues when staff are out sick, hospital admissions require care managers to travel to hospital and see clients. And Charlene adds, and the emergencies generate copious amounts of progress notes. Denise tells us office visits from clients, managing high caseloads, frequent phone calls, manager requesting answers on cases, incident reports, meetings, staff taking time off. So all of these have an impact, and all of these are happening for your care managers. Bettina and Angela and Heather tell us, as supervisors, we try to find a balance between managing our own clients and caseload and helping with our teams and supporting staff training. And you're actually anticipating one of the questions that's going to come, after this, but thank you. They also add, it is sometimes challenging to prioritize who goes first, our client, our work, their work, etc. Not easy. So Giddy adds, a typical day in the life of a care manager. You come to work and need to work on following through with hospitalization discharge planning, including mainly trying to get information from people that are not accessible by phone. You also need to contact at least 5 clients for routine case management. You leave a bunch of voicemails, start to document it, and then a client stops by to follow up on the results of their medical appointment that they went to last week. While you are speaking to that client, you missed the phone call you needed to receive. Your supervisor emails you to follow up on another thing, and now you are trying to figure out what to do first. Documentation, responding to your supervisor's email, or trying to call back the person, likely just to leave another voicemail. And it's 1 p.m. and you haven't yet eaten lunch. And I'm sure this resonates with lots of folks who are on today's call. Giddy, thanks so much. It really does help to bring it to life in all seriousness and illustrate the challenges that your care managers and therefore you have in dealing with time management. Okay, thank you. We're going to move on. And actually, one or two folks have begun to respond to this polling question. And it is, does this apply to you too? This issue with time management and all these interruptions and emergencies and conflicting tasks and such. Why, Bob, we're getting a quick answer to this one.
Indeed.
And I think we can show what we have here. We have 100% of our respondents are telling us, yeah, this is true for me too. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, thank you. And then if yes, which is for everybody, if you can give us some examples that really impact upon your work schedule, your time management. Although I would imagine that some of this is very similar to what your care managers are experiencing, I would imagine that being a supervisor also brings with it additional and special challenges. So we're going to give you a couple of minutes to respond to this. Lots of people are typing up. Thank you so much.
Hey, Paul, I noticed that Pamela was just typing up a couple of responses related to spreadsheets. I was just wondering, Pamela, if you could, what specific information and data are you using spreadsheets for most often? That just might be helpful to me from a perspective, if you have an opportunity to type that in as well.
Well, this is really resonating. Many people are typing up. There's no question that we've got a parallel process here that supervisors and care managers are really, in very much a similar boat concerning time management and many demands placed upon their time. Definitely seeing some themes emerge here. So we'll give folks another minute or so, and then we will share the responses. Okay, folks are still typing up, and please continue to do so. In the meantime, we'll begin to read some responses. Pamela tells us large Excel spreadsheets that I need to decipher. And also they come out of the blue and require immediate follow-up. Giddy tells us, well, I don't carry my own caseload. I have my own version of interruptions and crises, and I would imagine, lots of people can relate to that. Emily says, multiple meetings at different locations. Just the old, the old cloning problem of how can you be in different places at the same point in time. Delegation of tasks and projects from directors and above. Pamela adds, missing HML report, missing assessment reports. I guess this is what perhaps is on the spreadsheet. Large MCO data information. Bettina, Angela, and Heather tell us fitting in paperwork, staff training, client visits, many, many meetings, checking and approving the work of our team. Gina says also focusing on the paperwork and deadlines and meetings and staff training on new systems and new staff. Candida gives us some details here. A typical day for me would be doing my daily rounds with staff to find out about the clients that are currently at risk. Tend to speak with my supervisor about the clients that are currently at risk and decide how we can assist them daily. I would then receive encounter notes, supervision with staff, and other things that need to be complete. Also, if a staff is out, I would try to engage with some of their clients to make sure that they are taken care of until my staff returns, sometimes forgetting to take a break or lunch. Another common theme we're hearing, which is obviously not a good thing. Denise tells us, I'm working on my spreadsheet to indicate hospitalizations, HMLs completed, monthly face-to-face home visits, care plans, medicals, diagnosis of clients received. All of this information is necessary to manage me and my time. Giddy types up, tasks that I need to juggle, reading and staying on top of case notes, approving of billing at the end of each month, lots and lots of data management, lots of webinar and constant HARP updates, trying to decipher emails coming down from the state that are sometimes just telling me that math is closed from 3 to 5 a.m., dealing with clients who think I am a secretary when my care managers are out, but they often have important information to relay. Being the middleman between my supervisor who asks me to follow up on data management issues, to then working it out with my care managers. That is, please do an HML, follow up, did you do the HML, did you do the HML? We get the picture. And providing support to staff to help them balance and manage time. So, the picture that's being painted here, Bob, is one where supervisors themselves, for understandable reasons, are really struggling with their own time management and prioritization. And then at the same time, trying their best to work with their care managers who are in a similar boat. Okay, thank you. If we can just move on. And Bob, I'm turning things over to you for the moment.
All right, awesome. I appreciate that. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, everyone, too, for taking the time and providing the information. The perspective is really powerful based on the fact that, us guys sitting on this side of the table maybe aren't out in the field and getting a full appreciation for, just the workload. And I think these days, as I mentioned in a seminar a couple of weeks ago, it's really critical to just recognize, people are extremely, extremely busy. And, it doesn't get less busy. So I do appreciate where you're coming from, and my hope is, with regard to solutions, we're going to present a few things that were presented a couple weeks ago. My hope is just to maybe ask a few reflective questions to you in regards to how do I apply this. If it's helpful to me, great, yourself in regards to how you're attacking your day and your workflow and the things that you have to accomplish, but also what kind of support then can I provide to my folks, to my people, and I think that the issues are kind of, one of the things about time management is it does apply to everyone, and up and down and sideways, and the solutions do too, and I think that that's something that is really, really important. So as I work with organizations, we do see pockets of success, and I think a couple of things that I'd like to do is just reiterate a few things that we saw on some of these slides and just present a couple reflective questions related to those. And again, my hope is it doesn't come across as being flippant in any way or not appreciating the degree of maybe difficulty or challenge that you're experiencing, but simply just asking some questions to kind of think a little bit about, and then maybe pull on some ideas as I present a few things related to the training 2 weeks ago as well as we go through those. So I'm going to take just a step back, and again, some of the key problems for some of your case managers and care managers, related to IT. I think technology can definitely be leveraged, and it sounds like, there's some probably internal systems that serve a purpose and a function, and then some of those systems may not serve as much of a purpose or isn't maybe as purposeful as they could be. And again, that's a tough one, and we talk a little bit about sphere of control, what's inside of our control to kind of go after or not. So I'm not saying that maybe there's not some continuous improvement opportunity there, but as I work with organizations, again, sometimes that IT component and the tools and processes that are in place maybe aren't as helpful as they could be or can be. I would just ask this question, are the right people aware of that? Are there continuous improvement teams going on, or is that something that's even within the scope that's going to be an area we should focus some effort on moving forward? Or are there people working on those things? And hope is that those things come around. I will say that, again, as you come across tools and resources that you find interesting or helpful on a personal basis, by all means, it doesn't mean it's going to be helpful to others. As I mentioned, I think the concept of time management and workflow management is a little bit personal. What works for me might not work for you. But at the same time, when you have 5, 6, 7, or 8 people all saying, yeah, this tool can help, is there a way that we can internalize that and get consistent across the organization? That might be an opportunity to have those conversations. Also, the invite to IT to work with you in the field and or just get together with some folks there to share some ideas and stuff. I think can be fairly informative if that's not something that's already happening. But again, I'm not assuming that it's not. New regulations, I think that's something working in any of the healthcare or any of the environments that you're working in, whenever heavily regulated environments, we're going to have to deal with those. Again, that's one of those things that are out of our scope of control. But I think the question I would just pose is, do we have an effective process in place that really is helpful when we think about new regulations coming down the pipe? So how much acumen or industry acumen do our people have, or awareness of current trends and what's going on and how that's being communicated? So again, if that's fairly robust, that's great, and these regulations aren't catching people off guard because we've been talking about them for 6, 8, 9 months. Very rarely, I think, is there a new regulation that just pops itself as a surprise. That's right. Oh, we didn't see that one coming. And a lot of the regulations, they have to go through their process. So if we can be informed about kind of trending regulations ahead of time, would that ease some of the ability, or ease some of the stress related to kind of making some changes related to those regulations? The other component would just be, how are we communicating regulations? Do we have something in place where we're working with our team on really effective communication and clarity, and then working together on, do we have a plan? If this regulation passes, do we have a plan in place? What does that look like? How are we going to take action? And then how do we touch base with people on that? So sometimes a regulation gets passed, we have a plan, we execute, but we don't really follow up and ask people how things are going, or do we need to shift gears or make some changes to kind of adapt instead of having people struggle through that maybe on their own. So again, I'm not saying this is falling on ears. You may be sitting there going, yeah, we do all that. Super. But again, just some reflective questions that I would just bounce around with someone if they're navigating some of those waters in regards to regulations and how our teams are effectively or ineffectively dealing with those, or how do they pose a barrier to kind of us getting our stuff accomplished that we need to get accomplished. Emergency crisis, again, like part of the battle, right? I think with the work that you do, those things are definitely going to come up. Those and interruptions, I would just ask again, are we taking a look at analyzing really what are those common occurrence emergencies and crisis? Do we see some trends? Do we see some clusters of, man, we see a lot of emergencies and crisis popping up, and this is what's going on with those. What that does is allow us to at least prioritize those and see if we have in place the systems, process, framework, or whatever we need to do, structure, best practices to deal with those things in a very effective and efficient manner and productive manner, versus not knowing that. So again, to the degree that it might be helpful, if that is an area that's really something that is a true barrier and frustration and causing some stress, getting the team together and analyzing and tracking what are the emergencies, what are the crises that continue to pop up, are we really doing what we can do to manage the rest of the processes and things to minimize those and or deal with those most effectively and most efficiently. Same thing with interruptions. You know, staff training is interesting, so again, I always am very appreciative of people's time on the receiving end of any training or facilitation that I'm doing. But I think the key there is what is the value out of that? So my hope in the training here would be if I can invest 50 minutes of time and I get a few ideas that can save that 50 minutes of time for me, I'm breaking even, right? If I can save 50 minutes of time for all of my team members and I have 20 or 30 or 40 of those people over the course of the year, that's a good chunk of time and that's valuable. So I think the key here is Well, the training, overall role responsibilities is independent living, right, for a lot of our people, and making sure that they're healthy and capable of supporting themselves. So we want to make sure that there's clarity around that and keeping that in front of us so it doesn't get kind of taken away from all the stuff that's bogging us down, if you will. Opportunities from a supervisory perspective might be taking a look at, how are people grouping cases and approaching, cases of similar need. Again, I would guess some of your top performers are maybe organizing some things a little bit differently than folks that are struggling with some of that. Scheduling strategies and efficiencies. So many of you are probably in their roles and have been promoted because you did a great job. So how did you effectively take into account, case risk, client risk? How did they incorporate that into your scheduling strategies? How do you pick up efficiencies through scheduling your work and making sure that things are being accomplished and done? A simple role review of people's job description sometimes can be fun. I think sometimes we totally forget that, to bring those back around, because there's always so much stuff that falls into other duties as requested right at the bottom there. But just looking at those job duties, responsibilities might be something that could be helpful in repositioning. Man, I'm getting caught off guard. A lot of stuff's pulling me this way. How come? Is that something I should be doing, shouldn't be doing? You can capture some of those things as well. And I'm only sharing from a coaching perspective. I mean, my coaching hat's on a lot more. You have lots of hats that you're wearing. But when I'm wearing my coaching hat, sometimes getting back to the basics can be enlightening for people and provide some real targeted areas that we can focus on and help them with. The second one there, attention management skills. So again, let's focus on, how am I managing time, but more focused on how am I managing my attention to what I'm actually working on and doing. So to the point of controlling distractions, again, what are those distractions? They're going to be different for each individual person, but I think being able to identify what are the top 10 distractions that get in the way of me doing my job effectively, prioritizing those and going after one at a time with your people might be a powerful way of addressing some of those distractions. And there's always going to be low-hanging fruit that doesn't require a lot of time and resources probably to make some changes. So that's stuff that I always target with my clients. And again, you can work on some stuff that's a little harder or takes a little bit more time, but there's usually a handful of things that are going to be identifiable. So doing a distraction analysis, that's important, right? You got to walk through that process some way. Time analysis, same thing. How are people spending their time? People will complain a lot about how their time's being spent. So being able to document that during the week, just stopping for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, 5 minutes or a few minutes even, a minute or two, every half hour, and just jotting down a few notes on how I'm spending my time, what ate it up. That really creates a picture that then we can work with and help people with in regards to how we reorganize the use of that time, or if that time's being spent effectively or not, especially if we're being honest with ourselves. I know me, I'm kind of have the attention span of a gnat, so I'm constantly distracted. I have 14,000 windows open on my computer. That's probably bad. I'll get a LinkedIn message down in the corner. I'll be like, oh, I got to go wish that person a happy birthday. So, I mean, these are all things that if we're being honest with ourselves, they distract us. And so maybe there's opportunities that we can kind of own some of that stuff and make a difference for ourselves, and then coach our people up on those things as well. The distraction analysis can be done on an individual basis, but it can also be done on a team basis. So I think you identified some things that you said are priorities for your case and care managers. They identified some things that they said are as well. But getting together and talking about those things together might be really powerful. And again, encouraging scheduling focus time. So to the extent that you can, how are we scheduling focus time? You mentioned a lot of calls, but again, is the expectation that I take calls all the time, every day, every hour? Or is the expectation, is the reality that I could probably schedule between 4 and 5 o'clock, or 3:30 and 4:30, or whatever the time is for me, or 7:30 and 8:30, that I'm not taking any calls. This is focus time, and this is what I'm going to do during this time. Many of you are probably very good at that and capturing some of that time. So how can we take some of those best practices and incorporate them in our team members' our team member strategies and approaching some of the time management, okay? The last component is workflow management systems. So what I heard a lot of, based on the feedback that you provided today, which was awesome, was, process mapping some of these things. When there's communication breakdowns that are impacting productivity and efficiency, we need to get a snapshot of what does that communication process look like. If we talk about an intake of a high-risk client, number one, what is an example of a high-risk client? And from intake to discharge of an ideal case scenario, what does that look like? Sometimes we don't always have a picture of what the ideal is. We can deal with the curveballs that are pitched us, if you will, along the way. But we need an ideal process. What am I shooting for, right? So process maps are really, really important. We think through this stuff constantly in our head. We're always looking at, and we're looking at something going, hey, I got to do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, and then all of a sudden I'm over here and I got to come back to step 3. So getting that down on paper allows us and empowers us to really take a look at it and say, okay, what are we committing to that works, and what pieces of this stuff isn't working well, and how do we fix those pieces? Otherwise, it's really hard to address that from a team or an organizational perspective. And again, I would just say on an individual basis, people can do their own, but you have a lot of overlap with regards to the care you're providing and different systems and processes people are working with. We should be able to pick up some efficiencies if we can map some of those things out and have those discussions. Okay, so those are a few things. And again, you might even want to start with what's the most painful processes that we're participating in and issues that we're having. Let's start with one. Do the process, but give it its due diligence. And if you can pick up some efficiencies, hey, this took us a couple hours to do, but I think it's going to save us, a couple hours a week, every week for the next year times 10 people. That's a value add. So again, it's just selecting the things that are going to have high potential payback. Okay, so just a couple of quick things, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I'm happy to do any follow-up or answer any questions, like I said at the end here. Supervisory time management, just be aware, root cause analysis is part of your process as you look at any type of process that you're looking at. What's causing the interruptions? What's causing us to lose efficiency? What's causing the paperwork not to be completed? What's causing, right? And we have to ask those 5 whys. There are a lot of different strategies for analyzing the problem, but there's information related to those things out there. Resource analysis. Don't take it for granted that everybody's aware of all the resources available that can help them do their job more effectively and more efficiently. So again, if there's resources or a way to organize what's working for some of the top people, who are their contacts, how do they contact certain people, what's their strategy in getting in touch and minimizing callbacks. We want to document those things and make it available to new hires. If you think of how do you be successful in a case manager job in the first 30 days, what would we hand over, as a manual for that? That's kind of how I approach the thought process around some of those things. Some of these other things are pretty self-explanatory, but again, we want to keep in mind the importance of organization and planning and the execution of things. Execution, again, from a supervisory standpoint, how do you hold people accountable? How do we make sure people are committed to what they're doing and different things of that nature? But also, we need to be in that network. And again, I did provide a coaching document that I sent out to follow up on the training that provides the learning objectives to time management, workflow management, some suggested coaching questions, just to have a dialogue with your people if you catch up with them one-on-one, or you can work with them in a small group or team. Okay? And then lastly, I mentioned this, but it's at your disposal. So honestly, can this be helpful to you to kind of walk through and categorize, what are you doing? What's taking up your time during the day, during the week? What categories does it fall into, and do you have an opportunity to attack those things? But also a tool you can use with your team members as far as the urgency and importance matrix, what types of jobs are falling in what types of quadrants, and what can you do about those types of things. Okay? So I touched base on a few of these things, but the key here is how do you use these tools as supervisors to help your individuals? And each individual, something resonated with them out of hopefully the last workshop. Just asking that question is a starting point, and then how do you provide support with that? It might just be asking some reflective questions of your team members and helping transfer some of the things that are going really well or have worked well for you as well as others. Okay? So I'm going to turn it back over, Paul, to you, and I apologize. We only have a couple minutes here. I got started a couple minutes late, but we can wrap it up if you're comfortable doing that.
Absolutely, and this has been, Bob, extremely helpful. So I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes, I'm mindful of the time, just setting things up for our next online meeting. And just to remind folks, our next online meeting will be on December the 13th, and during that meeting, Laura Langner and I are going to be working with you around the supervision that you're doing related to time management and workload management. So we're not going to do this chat box question as a chat box right now, but really just as a setup for the next meeting. And that is, we'd like you to please just give some thought to everything that we've learned from Bob, as well as your own ideas, and how they can really be helpful to address all the challenges that you were very articulate about, in the first part of today's online meeting. So the question will be, when we get back together again in a couple of weeks, how can you use or how are you using case reviews and skills training and group supervision and data and field mentoring and anything else that comes to mind to help your care managers and actually help yourselves, with this very, very important issue. So when we come back again in a couple of weeks on December the 13th, we'll do a lot of talking about what are you doing, how's it going, what can we learn from you, who among, our group that's on the online meeting, can share. And by the way, if anybody is willing and is willing to spend some time actually sharing from your work, that would be great. We'd welcome that. Just, send me or send Ruth a quick email letting us know. But even absent that, we'll spend a lot of time talking with one another around. So how are you making this happen in supervision? Tell us about your successes. Tell us about your struggles. And hopefully we'll finish that online meeting with a very good sense of what can work and what you can try and what people are already doing. So that's the story. Just a reminder, about this coaching guide. I believe this has been distributed to folks a couple of times. So, this is also a useful tool for you. And what's floated up on your screen right now is a pod, a gray pod, which will allow you to download both today's PowerPoint as well as this coaching guide. So feel free to do that. And here's our contact information. And thank you all for joining us. It's exactly 10 o'clock. Bob, thank you as well.
Thank you.
Ruth, thank you. And Nancy, thanks for helping behind the scenes here. And folks, once you have downloaded, if you choose to download this information, feel free to log off. And Laura and I will be talking with you on December the 13th. Take care, everybody.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.